Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Build Something. Okay, now we're recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Build Something, a show where we build things. We're going to be talking about problem solving today and problem solving frameworks, and I'm really excited. My name is Tom Tate. I'm the project manager on the marketing team at AWeber. I'm joined by a couple of my friends. And we'll go around. Chris, you're in the top right for me, so let's just start with you today, Chris.
All right, nice. I'm a creative director, and I love just building things. Like last night, I built something really fun with these guys, and it's my favorite thing to do.
Hey, I'm Megan. I'm a product manager, and I like building things in I guess more of a philosophical way. And I'm excited to build a community here and get to know people who want to start things.
Yeah, so real quick, this is episode 2. Last week, episode 1, we kind of talked about the reasons behind starting Build Something, which we really hope at the very least develops into a community of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, creative people who are interested in solving problems. For us to get together every Friday at 2 p.m. or to 10 p.m. if we're having technical issues and talk about how we can support each other and really dig into, some of the reasons why we may be struggling. And also another important thing is to kind of share what we build and share our successes. So that was kind of our recap of last week, and you can check that out. If you search iTunes podcasts, if you search Build Something, you'll actually episode 1. It's a little truncated, but you'll get a good idea of what we talked about, who we are, and what we're all about. And we're really excited to keep that going. Today we're going to be talking all about frameworks. And this really came out of, we're constantly passing articles back and forth between each other. I think that that's been a trend. I learned so much from the things that inspire you guys to the point where you need to share it with me, which is really cool. So just a tip, if you're not sharing things that inspire you, start sharing them because there's other people that can definitely benefit from that. And one of the articles that kind of came out through making the rounds in our office here was all about kind of like a model for problem solving and starting something, whether it's a startup or whether it's an app or something. Megan, I believe you shared that. So do you want to talk about, kind of that article, what the main thesis was before we kind of jump into different types of frameworks?
So just defining the Getting Started article, that one?
It looks like Chris just put it in the chat. So if you guys want to check it out, why product thinking is the next big thing in UX design, which doesn't sound like it's an article about frameworks, but if you dig into it, like you'll really see what we're talking about. So I'll pass it on to Megan.
Yeah, so this one I think really speaks to what I'm excited about just from a product management perspective, and it's thinking about the problem that you're trying to solve and for who. I think we get really excited about the tools that we have or something that sounds really awesome to us, but we're not really sure who we're solving the problem for, and that's where the excitement comes, and that's where growth comes from. And being able to focus in on that, I think, is really important before you rush to the business plan and before you rush to all the things that you think you should be like a little MBA and get started. It's really understanding your customer or the person that you're trying to solve a problem for, and make that a simple question to answer and not really complicated. Really great ideas come from that.
Do you think that having an understanding of the customer is more important than the problem, or are they so intertwined that there's really no distinction? Because I know like there's a lot of talk about personas, and I actually keep hearing the word avatar pop up a lot, like almost used synonymously with personas. Is it the same thing? Like if you understand your persona so well, like you have to have an understanding of their problem, or can you have one first? Like, is it a chicken or egg or the same thing?
I think it's kind of the same thing because I think it comes from where the idea comes from, right? So it's like, do I know a community of people who have similar struggles and hopes and dreams? Or I see this problem that's happening but who am I really solving that problem for? So I think it is a chicken and the egg in terms of how you look at the equation. But I don't think you always have a solid problem for, like I have a small business and I sell furniture. But I don't have to know what my persona is to know some of those problems, or the other way around. But I think it's important to define those two things. That is an important equation to have, and to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, before we kind of jump into this even further, I think it's really important, and we kind of talked about this over a lunch conversation the other day. There's a big difference between your kind of your problem-solving framework and your business plan, because I think a lot of people jump into the business plan and they want to know, like, how is this going to be monetized? How am I going to run this as a business and kind of make my return on investment? And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that or shouldn't be working on that in tandem, but your business plan is not always like a clear definition of the problem that you're trying to solve, which is why I think, and we started discussing this, it's really important to at least make sure that you've defined the problem that you want to solve, talked about, or at least have a good understanding of the persona or the avatar that's experiencing that problem. And then, and this is probably a topic for a whole nother show, but defining success, to really say, like, yeah, this problem was something that we were able to go out and solve.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think that whole idea of having a lens to look at all your decisions through is key. So you could spend a lot of time figuring out all these grand plans of how to monetize and how are you going to structure your business? Is it a sole proprietorship? Is it an LLC? Like, when you don't know the problem you're going to start to solve at the beginning, you don't have an effective way to move forward, because you can become scattered or focused on the details that don't matter. And plus, if you're probably on this blab, you like thinking about that. You like dreaming about it, and that's the fun stuff. So spend some time on that.
And you know what? It kind of brings up an example that I just saw on Shark Tank, and I'm sure a lot of people, if you're entrepreneurial, you've probably seen this too, because you're addicted to Shark Tank like I am. But it was this gentleman who was working on a product for 6 years, and it was a heated coffee can. So it was coffee in an aluminum can, and he created some proprietary way to heat it so that you can buy it at a convenience store hot or heat it up in your home to save the time of brewing coffee. Really awesome guy. I'm going to let Chris back in. And he had like a lot of enthusiasm. But the problem that he discovered, it kind of originated from Japan, where it was a problem. He saw it over there. He wanted to bring it to the States. And when it came down to it, like, the problem of being able to find hot coffee at any hour of the day is not really a problem that we have here in the United States. So you can almost, if you don't define the problem, you can run into, chasing the money and chasing the business idea. I think he said 6 years and $2 million that he invested in this product, in R&D and testing and making sure it tasted good. But I think, like, that's a perfect example of losing sight of, like, the actual problem and who you're trying to serve. So I thought that was a really good example of, if he had a framework, he might have not invested so much time and energy into that. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thank you. I missed you guys.
So I think at this point we can definitely just jump into different types of frameworks that we've encountered, either professionally or in our own kind of entrepreneurial pursuits. I would say, if you're watching live right now and you're currently using a framework, or there's a certain model that you like, or if you just want to plus one a model that we talk about, please just feel free to interact in the messages. And also, if you type in /Q, \Q, and then a question, it's going to pop up in the questions tab on the left. Okay, so Chris just, perfect example, would have used in the past to set a framework for your new projects. Thank you, Chris. Feel free to ask any questions, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. So Chris, you've shared a couple with me since we've been working together. Is there any particularly that you want to just hop into with describing?
So I will let someone else describe my new favorite one, which is that Mad Lib format, so I won't talk about it too much. But my prior favorite one is called the Lean Canvas, and it just does a great job of asking you really simple questions. It's I'll find a link, or if somebody else wants to grab a link to the official Lean Canvas site. It's just one sheet of paper, essentially. You can do it in a spreadsheet or something like that if you wanted to even. Most recently, I did it in a table in Confluence. And it's just a bunch of really simple questions that make you ask tough questions that will really affect you in the long term about whatever your project is. They're questions about who your audience is, what you have to offer them that's different than what's already out there, why it's special, why it's not terribly easy to duplicate. And it forces you to put it all out on paper. But it's also easy enough that you can do it yourself really quickly, or you can sit down just with a group of awesome friends and just figure it out and have fun doing it. But the thing I like best about it is, well, two things. One of the questions that it asks you about your idea is to fill in the phrase Netflix for cats or something, whatever your business is.
Sure.
And that's just a really helpful little, sell tagline that you can use when you're talking internally. The other thing that's really nice about it is it can act as a really awesome filter, like I think Megan said earlier. Okay, we want to do this thing. Well, does it conform to what our canvas was? This canvas of who we are and what we wanted to do. It just makes all those decisions much clearer. So I love it. Lean Canvas.
Yeah.
+1.
I've seen, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen Canvas types that have cost structure and revenue stream built in, right? Like, is that part of I've seen really simplified ones, right? Where it's just like a very basic grid, and I've seen ones with more blocks. Like if you look at it visually, you'll see they're all broken out into different grid sections. So it's not like you're completely separating your concept with, like, is this going to be a viable business pursuit, right? So which I always liked about Lean Canvas. Like it wasn't so separate, but at least like that was it was kind of ancillary to, is the problem, the solution, the unique value proposition, and the persona, the customer segment, is all of that in place before you even start talking about the revenue stream and the cost structure.
Yeah, and the way that the Lean Canvas is set up, all one canvas, but it's really broken out into two sections where
we're losing Chris.
All of the Did you lose me?
It's breaking up a little bit.
Shoot. Well, it's basically revenue stuff on the bottom, all sorts of really fun aspirational stuff on the top.
Sure. Yes, and I love that too. So we have a link. If you scroll up in the messages, you'll check that out. And if you're listening to the podcast replay of this, we'll put that in the show notes as well, so that you can check out the Lean Canvas. Definitely one of my favorites as well. Megan, is there any specific frameworks that you want to jump into to talk about, or it doesn't have to be a framework so much as like a concept that you've really gravitated towards when you're developing product?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk more about the concept, because I think as someone starting out, particularly if you're trying to, if you're shifting gears, or you have your day job and you're starting on your dream, I think it's important to just get started and start at a very small, easy, uncomplicated level to do that. So if you're in software development, you might have heard about Agile, and there's this thing called user stories. Anyway, what this does is it really explains what you're trying to do and how you can help your customer, right? So like as a customer, I can do this thing so that I can make more money. Really simple framework, really simple setup, but it's easy to start articulating what you want to do, and makes you think about one problem and you don't get caught up in all the details. Because for me, my natural tendency is to think about like, okay, what are all the processes I need to do, and how much money do I need to make, and how do I know if I'm going to be successful? But starting at that very foundational level is a really easy and fun place to start, and it kind of takes away the pressure of all those other things. So I'm going to type that little formula into the message thing, but unfortunately I can't type and talk at once, so I'm going to do that real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so we have a couple questions about like what this blab is about exactly. Lean Canvas. Lean Canvas should be free, so if you see a website that tells you to pay for the Lean Canvas or subscribe to something, don't do it. You can do a Google image search, and you'll see a bunch of different templates for Lean Canvas.
Yeah, there's some awesome like Excel templates and things too, if that's how you prefer to work, where people already have laid out the grids with really cool sections that are just really easy to fill in.
Yeah,
and if you love Excel. Yeah.
And just to answer the question of what this blab is for those that joined in before we got started, so this is really the early days of kind of online community that we're trying to build called Build Something, where every week, every Friday specifically at 2 p.m., we're just going to be meeting to talk about getting projects off the ground and being successful and helping each other solve problems, whether it's in business, startups, whether you're a solopreneur, entrepreneur. We're really just working together to identify and solve problems that we're having with our business. It could be with our marketing, our product development. It's really no limits. So you tell us, as a member of this community, because you are watching right now, you are a member of this community, let us know in the comments what you want to hear. If you're listening on the replay, tweet at us at BuildShowCo and just let us know. Okay, Megan, you typed your statement. Do you want to take over?
Yeah. So you can see in the messages on the side, I put in a like really simple formula just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And it's just a really easy way of you have a person, they want to do something, so something can happen. And it's a great way, if you have a blank piece of paper, you might want to doodle it out or just think about it. But it takes away all the complicated, you think you need to be an MBA stuff. The other thing about this too is it doesn't focus on monetizing. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to say, all right, well, if I'm going to do something with this, then it's got to make money right away. Well, make sure that you have the problem first. Karma Project Co. put in the messages on the side, a great quote from the article that was shared earlier: fall in love with a problem, not a specific solution. This is a great way to brainstorm and set as we're talking about, framework to get started, to just let you ruminate on what that is. The thing that you thought initially, that's the solution that you had, the thing that you wanted to build may not be the right fit, but you've defined what you're thinking about. So it's a great way to think about it and start the brainstorming.
I also love that you kind of touched on something we talked about earlier about not worrying about the monetization right away and focus more on the problem. And that quote really speaks to that too. If anybody listening here, and I'm sure a few know of Gary Vaynerchuk. So Gary Vaynerchuk is one of my favorite kind of entrepreneurial personalities. And he has a podcast called the Ask Gary V Show. And Craig, thanks for stopping by. Craig Enthusiast. Sorry you got to run, but thank you, and check us out next week. So Gary Vaynerchuk, somebody calls in and asks some questions, and then he kind of gives his answer. And somebody called in and said, if I'm developing an app and that app solves a very specific problem, should I worry about monetizing it ahead of time? And he got so fired up because
Gary Vaynerchuk got fired up.
Yes, he got so fired up. Well, like more so than usual. Like he got so frustrated with this question, and I almost didn't think he could answer it. And this was recent too, so if you check the archives, you can probably catch it out or check it out. But what I loved about it was he kind of said like that's what commerce is. Like that's what commerce has been since the beginning of commerce. Like people don't buy things just to buy them. They buy things that solve problems. So if you are developing something that truly solves a problem that appeals to an audience, no matter how small or large that audience is, people are going to pay for it. Like that kind of, you're going to get value back for it. So like, don't get hung up on that at first, and really just focus on the problem. So I love that quote, fall in love with the problem, not a specific solution.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about some of these Canvas frameworks, both the Lean Canvas and this other one that I can't wait to talk about, is that they force you to think about the problems in terms of actual people and not just maybe some I tend to romanticize things and be like, oh, I think this is such a cool idea. And oftentimes it's based on the fact that I thought it up. And I haven't really thought about how another person might use it and how it solves problems that real people have.
Sure.
Yeah.
So before we keep going, so we do have a question. Chris, I might volley this over to you, only because you're probably the most artistic of the three of us. Maybe?
Yeah,
True.
for sure. So the question from Megan is, I'm going to paraphrase this, but when you're a creative person and you're working on let's call it a creative product or project, it's hard to make things that are sustainable as a business without sometimes sacrificing the art. And I can definitely identify with that. But I would encourage all of us maybe to think about the problems that creative products solve in sometimes a different way than maybe a tech product. Like, tech products oftentimes solve productivity problems or workflow management problems and things like that. And so our primary goal should be, like, does this make people work more efficiently, or does this make information transfer clearer? But with creative work, sometimes the goals are really different. And with really successful creative projects, and with the most successful creative projects I've had the opportunity to be involved with, it was always user-centric. Sometimes it was like, how can we change the way people feel from before they interact with this creative thing to after they interact with this creative thing? And I think there's a lot of power in that, in creativity and design's ability to provide a real benefit to people outside of standalone products. I don't know, does that answer that question at all?
I think it does. I mean, I definitely can agree with that. I also keep thinking about your recommendation from last week, which was a children's book, but it was so kind of ingenious in the way that it used different technologies. And if you're just kind of listening in, it's basically a book that takes different data points and incorporates that into a story. So like, you would put your address in, and it would use the Google Maps API to basically catch an aerial shot of your home, and that would be included in the book. And it was really cool. So like, if you want to check that out from the podcast, or Chris, if you want to drop that link in again, that'd be really cool. But there's a good example. Yeah, I mean, there's a good example of just like, yeah, lost my name. There you go. So Just Jets has clearly heard of it. Cool.
People who made that original book, this is, I think, their second book, and it's just incredible. I'm going to go off on it a little bit. I realize it's an aside, and forgive me, but it was this awesome combination of people who you would think of as traditionally creative, illustrators and authors, and a group of equally creative developers who came together, recognized a problem in the creative space, that there weren't these books that were hyper-personalized and also interesting to kids, and they came up with an incredible solution. I would have loved to have known how they approached the framework for that project,
Yeah, and maybe we can reach out to them too, because it seems like they're kind of a small team, so it could be cool if we can get them on to talk about this in the future. That would be really awesome. All right, I'm going to jump back into the topic at hand. There's two terms that I love thinking about when we talk about problem solving. It's okay, Chris, I ramble too. I think they both come out of Agile, right? So we talk about Agile as like a development methodology. And if you're in tech, I'm sure you've heard of it. The first is MVP, and it stands for minimum viable product. And the definition that I have here is from an article that I'm going to share in the notes right now. And MVP, minimum viable product, the version of a new product that brings back the maximum amount of validated learning about your customers with the least effort. And I really love that. And the article kind of speaks, it speaks against it in a little bit, and I'll get into that in a second. But it's all about validated learning, right? So we can create these frameworks, but then it's what do you create? And MVP is probably something to talk about after we discussed the framework, right? But what do you create to validate that like people had this pain point, people are benefiting from your solution, and how can you do that in the least amount of time to bring the maximum amount of learnings? It's not 6 years and $2 million in investing in hot coffee in aluminum cans, right? Like it's fast, it's iterative, and that's what I kind of gravitate towards with Agile. But in this article, which I definitely think everyone should read, it flips MVP kind of on its side and talks about MLP, which is minimum lovable product, which is the version of a new product that brings back the maximum amount of love from your early tribe members with the least effort. And I think this concept is awesome because like I think where MVP misses the mark is it's not enough to make someone feel good. And I think that like when you're using a product or engaging with a brand, or there has to be a feeling component. So like even if we are fulfilling the void of I have a need and here's the fulfillment, there has to be like a positive sentiment when interacting with that. And I think MLP kind of hits that, build something that a small amount of users will love. And if anyone has read Crossing the Chasm, which is it's a really cool business book. I mean, it's a little wordy at times, but it's kind of a classic. And I was actually kind of turned on to it from our director of product here. It talks about early adopters and turning them into like fanatics, fanatics for your product and fanatics for your brand. Who's the author? I'll get that in a second and drop it in. But just this idea of minimum lovable product, really awesome. If you have a moment to check out this article, I really recommend it. So let me grab the link for that.
I'll say also, like, focusing on the idea of a minimum lovable product is better for you as a development team too, whatever it is you're building, a tech product or whatever, because you have a more engaged audience who's more apt to give feedback and advocate for you. And also personally and selfishly, nothing gets me more jazzed than when we try something new and people react well to it. Like vocal people tweet about it or reach out directly or something. And that just, every time that happens, it reinvigorates me, whether it's really positive, effusive praise, or, oh, this is kind of cool, but I'd like this one thing or other to be better next time. It's the most powerful motivator for me, and it's rad.
That's right. And I just want to jump in and say, like, be a little selfish. Have whatever your passion project is, be passionate about it. Let other people be passionate about it. And for me, I know that sparks creativity when I feel like people are just like this in the community and on board with what I'm doing. I can get that feedback and also be excited. It's just a much more desirable experience.
Not to go back to this team again, but just the fact that at Just Jets knew immediately that we were talking about Lost My Name, it shows me that they built a minimum lovable product. Like they've built something that it almost requires that you not only purchase it and consume it, but talk about it. And I think that you can only do that if like the experience is remarkable. Like it's funny because I never heard of that book before. Chris recommended it, and I went and ordered a copy for my son. Like literally like right after the show, and he was like saying something about the video on the homepage, and I said, like, I didn't even watch the video on the homepage. I was so fascinated by Chris's recommendation and the concept that I just like went straight to checkout, and I never do that. So I think that it goes a long way when you have a problem, a framework, a solution that just it comes together so well that people just have to talk about it. How important is a framework? So here's a question that we kind of talked about over lunch as well. Can you get started without a framework? If you just have kind of a cool idea, whether it's an app idea or whether it's just something you want to build on the side, or you think something's awesome, do you just jump right into it without a framework and figure it out later? Like, is that possible? And kind of what are the ramifications of taking that route? Whoever wants to answer.
I think it's possible, sure. But I think it's more, you're leaning towards more of a lightning in a bottle type approach. And the really cool thing about these frameworks that we're talking about today in particular is it doesn't take long. Like it just allows you to pause for a minute and, kind of calibrate and see which direction you're going to go and then go that way. And if it doesn't work, then you calibrate and go a different way.
Sure.
But it takes the mystery out. So I think it's possible to do without a framework, but man, is it helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you too. I mean, I do think it's possible to start, but it sets you up for so much failure in the future, or it introduces so many points of failure for the future. Like, the best thing about having a framework, again, in my opinion, is that it gives you a reference point. So,
Sure.
like, if you start without a framework and then you encounter a big problem, especially early on in the process, with the way that you solve that problem can drastically change the future of your project or your business or your community. You know, the way that you react to that, if you don't have some sort of guidepost to refer to, could completely change the soul of your project.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Have you guys heard of the 5 whys technique before?
No.
I have.
Okay.
But
So if you have, like, so we introduced a few frameworks. We talked about Lean Canvas, which has a section for the problem, right? And we talked about kind of the structure of a user story in Agile, which kind of also includes a section for the problem that you're solving. The 5 whys is a good way, it's a good technique to get to the root problem so that you're not solving the wrong problem up front, right? So all of our frameworks kind of anticipate that you're putting the right problem into the mix. So I'll give you the example of the 5 whys, and it's awesome. So the Washington Monument, and this is a true story, the Washington Monument was corroding, right? It was actually falling apart, and they were having a hard time figuring out like why it was falling apart. And the reason why it was falling apart was because they were using harsh chemicals to clean the Washington Monument, and it was kind of corroding the side of the structure. So they could have went the route of, and I might be fudging this a little bit, so don't quote me. They could have went the route of investing like a ton of money in like what should we do to solve this corrosion problem? Should we just rebuild it with new materials? Should we invest in new chemicals or new cleaning solutions so that we can clean the side of the monument? And they were smart enough to ask the 5 whys, right? So the first why was, why is it corroding? Because of the harsh chemicals. Well, why were they cleaning it so frequently? And what they found was that the Washington Monument was covered in pigeon poop, right? So there's pigeon poop all over the monument, so it forced them to clean it quite frequently. So then they started asking, like, well, why is there so much pigeon poop? And it was because the pigeons were eating spiders that kind of like collected around the Washington Monument, right? So there was like an almost infestation of spiders around the monument that were feeding the pigeons that were causing them to poop all over it. And then they kind of asked, like, why were there so many spiders? And then they realized that it was because there were all these gnats, right? So there was all these gnats that the spiders would eat, that the pigeons would eat, right? And it was this whole chain of things. And then finally, someone was smart enough to say, well, why are there so many gnats? And it was because they were turning the lights on at dusk too early, right? So like it all had to do with the timing of the lights that were being turned on around the monument. So once they adjusted the lights by I think it was like an hour or something, and again, I'm probably fudging like the specifics, but you get the concept. Once they changed when the lights went on, the pigeon poop problem went away with no money invested, right? So it's all about, like, the 5 whys is a really great way to start thinking about like getting down to the root cause of what you think the problem is before you even get started. It's really cool. Like, I recommend people try that even today. Like, even if you have an established product, or even if you have an established team that's working on a problem, start asking the 5 whys. Just ask why, and then like you might get a totally different answer, than you thought you did in terms of like who you're serving and why you're serving them. Really awesome.
Yeah.
All right, that was my rambling, so I was able to ramble on that.
That was
Thanks.
awesome, though.
Cool. Okay, so we're coming up on like 45 minutes. We want to try to wrap this up in an hour. So I do want to talk about the Mad Lib style that we discovered recently. I don't know who wants to jump in and talk about that one, but it's in that article, right? So it's in the first article that we posted.
So
Okay.
I'll talk about it real quick. This
Sure.
elaborates on the whole user story idea in such a beautiful way. I think it asks the right questions, and really makes you, it's kind of a mashup of all these things that we've been talking about. It kind of puts in the 5 whys because it really makes you think about the problem you're solving, but it does it in a very formulaic way. So it's not, you don't have to worry about standing up against a whiteboard and having no ideas, where do I start? So we happen to have someone very creative, Chris, on our group who kind of implemented this in a fun way. So I'm going to turn it over to him, but it's a really cool tool to provide a framework for you.
Yeah, it's really awesome. It's this Mad Lib style workflow that we were working on a project recently, experimenting with some stuff, and it was just so fun. It's my new favorite way to lay out the high-level framework of a project. And we were trying to figure out, Tom mentioned, like, it would be awesome to help people work through this problem on their own easily and, follow this Mad Lib style thing in a really simple, fun way. So we decided to build a little page on buildshow.co. So if you guys want to play around with this as well, you can. I'm going to drop a link in the sidebar. And it basically is a really simple form that walks you through this Mad Lib. The structure of it is, in order to, and then whatever your vision is, our product will solve whoever your target audience is, their problem of whatever the problem is, by giving them whatever your strategy is. Then you'll know what your product works when you see whatever the goal is. And then you hit build, and it creates a little image of that you can, throw up wherever you want. You could tweet it, you could print it out and pin it on your wall, or whatever you want to do. But what made me so excited about this was that the 3 of us worked together on this completely. Like, this was not something that would have happened if any one of us wasn't involved. Megan found the initial article and really highlighted the fact that this was a cool piece of it. Tom suggested that we try and make this easily sociable and usable to everybody in the Build Something community. And then I built a web page for it. And now we have this cool little thing. And we would love if you guys give it a try, play around with it, and offer your suggestions. If you want to change something on it, suggest that we change it. And I will probably change it for you tonight or this weekend, because I love doing that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And props to Chris for standing that up so quickly, because we literally talked about it yesterday, and it exists today, which is really cool. So definitely high five, Chris, and props to web development for being so awesome too. The fact that we can utilize open source stuff and really make these types of things happen really quickly, or not we, the collective we. Chris, that's right. Chris can do it. Okay, cool. If anybody's just checking us out, again, we are Build Something. We're a community for builders, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. This is episode 2. If you're just checking it out, I really hope that you guys will connect with us. You can connect with us on Twitter at BuildShowCo, and you can check out our website, which is buildshow.co. Entrepreneurs, yes, we are definitely in the business of serving entrepreneurs. That's awesome. We like to think of us as like uspreneurs or wepreneurs. It's all about the community.
Blankpreneurs.
Yeah, we just need fill in the blankpreneurs.
Yes.
Before we get to recommendations, is there anything else you guys want to touch on about frameworks that we didn't hit?
Just give it a shot. I think that that's a running theme of all our shows, is just start it, give it a try, and see if it helps. And we would love to hear if it does help you. Hit us up on Twitter, get in touch. We really want to build a community.
And that said, don't let it get in the way too. So if you are struggling with the framework, but you feel so passionate about just getting started, I would still recommend, even though we talked about making sure that you do it, just get started, and then just be mindful, even as you're moving so quickly, that this is such an important component. So as long as you're mindful of it and you're working on it, it's okay to pop open your web browser and start coding something. You know what I mean? If you code, or prop up the easel and start painting. You know what I mean? Whatever you do, like just get started and don't let that stop you, but just always be mindful of the framework on the back end. Yeah, this was a really awesome conversation. So we talked about a ton of frameworks. If you pop back to buildshow.co later tomorrow, maybe over the weekend, we'll populate some of the links that we talked about. And if you're listening to the podcast on the replay, we'll also have the links in the show notes so that you can check out kind of a recap of all the things we hit on, because we talked about quite a lot. So thanks everyone who contributed in the comments. I really appreciate it. It's been a lively group, and we're going to be back here next week, every Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're happy to have you join us again. I don't think that we have a topic for next week, but that's awesome. I like that.
That's right.
We'll figure it out. And if you have any suggestions, tweet at us. So before we head off, we want to kind of do something that we do every show, where we kind of give recommendations. And these recommendations can be anything. It's not just kind of business apps or productivity tools that we like, or things that are going to help you grow. Like I said, Chris recommended a children's book last week that I thought was absolutely awesome. And if you guys have recommendations, feel free to drop them in the side as well. So I'll get started if you don't mind. If you're not tired of hearing me talk, I'm going to put it in the chat. So my recommendation is Tom Perrotta. Tom Perrotta, he's an American novelist. He's a writer. You probably know about the films that have been adapted from his books. So if you've seen Little Children or Election, that came from Tom Perrotta, his novels. But he's probably most known right now for writing the novel The Leftovers, which is now an HBO show. It's cool. It's from Tom Perrotta and one of the creators of Lost. And it's just started to get very like Lost-esque. So if you're a fan of Lost, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's really weird and really bizarre and totally HBO-ish. So if you're into that sort of thing, you'll probably enjoy it. But I mostly recommend him for his first publication, which is a book of short stories called Bad Haircut, growing up in the 1970s. It's so hilarious, and I'm currently kind of struggling working through my first novel right now. It's been my major side project for this year. And one of my inspirations has been that book, which I read when I was like 15 and probably have read like 10 times since, just because I love the way that it's written, and it just has so much personality. So if you're looking for a good collection of short stories, things that you can just kind of crank out, before you go to bed, Tom Perrotta, Bad Haircut. It's my recommendation.
Recommendation made.
Nice one.
Okay, Chris.
So I'm going to continue my streak of recommendations that do no good for anyone, but are kind of cool to look at. And I wanted to recommend, so we're like right outside of Philadelphia, and this is a Philly company called Momentary Ink. Let me drop this in here. What they do is really cool. They will print really high quality temporary tattoo versions of a tattoo that you're thinking of getting that have this like, coating on it when you apply it. So they're like waterproof and sunproof for a certain amount of time. So you can really kind of test drive your tattoo before you get one. I am not tattooed at all. I just kind of a wimp when it comes to any sort of pain. But I saw this and I was like, man, I got to give this a try. So I'm trying to come up with which one I want to test out right now. But give it a look. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Cool.
All right,
that's
rounding
awesome.
it out.
Megan. Yeah.
So it's Friday, and it's the end of the week, so you need to laugh, right? So my recommendation, which I have shamelessly promoted to my friends, is called Computer.show. It is a tech show set in the early 80s, and it's hilarious. And I will leave it at that. Check it out. It's well done, and I hope you'll laugh a lot going into the weekend.
I have to second that, because you sent me over Computer.show a couple weeks ago, and
Oh my goodness.
it has been like the perfect Friday afternoon pick me up, just to carry you into the weekend because of how hilarious and well done it is. All right, awesome. I think that concludes the show. Unless there are any questions from the audience, we have 6 minutes, but I'm not opposed to just stopping right now. So if you stuck with us, thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend. If you follow us on Twitter, if you follow us on Blab, we are going to pick a topic, I promise, for episode 3, and we'll kind of publish that. So we'll see if it's something in line with what you're interested in. If not, just come hassle us with questions, whether they're relevant or not. We're happy for the interaction.
Definitely.
Yeah, just check us out, buildshow.co, and feel free to when you drop in, just drop your own personal links in the chat. We want to see who you are and what you're building as well. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, I'm at TNRT, 4 letters at TNRT. Chris is at ClickPop, same as his name in Blab, and Megan, same as her name in Blab, at MJ Nesta. So follow us, we'll follow you back, we can interact, we can talk, and we can just work on building awesome things. What are you talking about here is the latest comment. I'm so sorry, but you're coming at like the last second of this.
And it's also shouted.
It's chat.
Shouted.
Yeah, but we're talking about frameworks for problem solving, and as soon as this replay goes live, you'll get to watch us kind of fumble through talking about problems. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys so much. This has been really great. I'm gonna sign off for now. I love it. I'm gonna sign off for now, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you next week.
This was fun.